Grew up with siblings or a sibling, right? Okay, raise your hand if, like me, your siblings sometimes drove you crazy. Yeah, I think, remember, you're in church, no lying, right? We could have a family feud over here, huh? Right? Sometimes our siblings drive us crazy. I was convinced at times that some of my siblings came from other planets. I was quite certain of that along the way, or that the doctor had made a mistake somewhere along the way, maybe mixed a couple of kids up or something. Our siblings drive us crazy sometimes, and part of the reason that our siblings sometimes drive us crazy is that we play a game in families. We play a game with our siblings. It's called the comparison game. The comparison game. It goes something like this. If you're a younger sibling, your oldest sibling in your family, the oldest child in your family, he or she drives you nuts, don't they? Right? They drive you nuts because they've always got to be right. Right? They're always the one that's got everything in order. They've got all the right answers, right? They're always uptight. You want to say, loosen up, right? And they drive you especially crazy because it's the oldest one that always thinks they're your parents' favorite, right? Right? So we play this game, this comparison game. Now, are there any youngest children in the family here tonight? A few youngest. We're going to pick on you a little bit because you are the spoiled brat of the family. I'm sorry, right? You know, you're the one the rest of us we had to train our parents for you so you could get away with murder, right? That's kind of how it is. And the youngest drives us crazy because it's the youngest that can do anything they want and they never get in trouble, right? This is how the comparison game works. If you're a middle child, any middle children here in a family, we're sorry, but we forget your name sometimes, right? We forget about you. I'm sorry, right? You're the forgotten one. And then if you're the only child, if you're an only child, right? You have no clue what we're talking about, right? Right? We do this in our families. We play this game called the comparison game. But I want to suggest today that it's not just in our families, that we play that comparison game every day of our life. You see, I think comparison is as common to us as the air we breathe. It's as common to us as breathing. Because when we're in elementary school, something happens. When we're in elementary school, we start to notice that there are some kids who are smart, and there are some kids who maybe aren't so smart. And then we start to learn that there are some kids who dress a little nicer than others, and then there are other kids who don't dress so nice. There are some kids who are athletic. There are some that aren't so athletic. And you see, this comparison game begins. We start to take our cues on how to live based on how our friends live. We look to our left and we look to our right to see if we measure up. It's how the comparison game begins. I have a son who's in 5th grade, and he plays soccer. We were at a soccer tournament a couple weeks ago, and he came to me as soon as we got there, and he said, "Dad, there's a team from Fargo here. They're a tryout team," he said. He wasn't just saying there was another team. He was playing the comparison game. He was saying, our little team of 11-year-olds from Alexandria, we don't stack up. We're not even close to that team from Fargo, right? And he's already playing the comparison game. We adults do this same thing. Women, you know you do this. Women are really good at this. You compare your looks to other women. You compare what you wear to other women. You compare your husbands to the husbands other women have, right? You're in church, be honest. You compare your kids' achievements to the achievements of other kids. That's how the comparison game works, right? It has a hold on you women. Now, I'm going to say that we men, it's a little different for us men because we don't really compare ourselves to one another. It doesn't quite work that way for us men. It's a little different except when it comes to cars, right? Except when and our houses, right? and our boats and our grills, right? And our kids in sports. If you've got a kid who's been fortunate enough to be in sports, you know, dads, that we compare our kids when it comes to sports, right? There's this little voice inside of us that comes on when our kids are active in sports, right? Because there can only be one best player on the team, dads. You know this. There can only be one best player. And when that best player is up to bat, or he's got the ball and he drops the ball, or he strikes out that one best player and it's not our kid, you admit this, parents, dads especially, there's a little voice inside of us that goes, yes. Right? You know that's true. We play the comparison game. We play the comparison game. It's like we live in the land of You say right? Everywhere we look, we see someone who's smarter, someone who's wealthier, someone who's happier, someone who's more happily marrieder. I made that up, right? But that's only half the sort of land of issue, because the other half of the issue goes like this. Everywhere around us, there's always someone who's heavier. There's always someone we look at and we see that they're poorer than us. They're less than happily married-er than us. And we start to think that we are superior. That's how it works. You see, there's a phrase I heard the other day, and I think it sticks for us. There's no win in comparison. You get that? Say that with me. There's no win in comparison, right? Because whenever we start to compare ourselves with others, we're filled with a little bit of anxiety. And that anxiety leads to discontent. We're never happy when we play the comparison game. Well, luckily for us, we're not the first ones to deal with this. Way back when, Jesus told a story about a couple of sisters who played the comparison game. Their names were Mary and Martha. And we're going to read that story today. I invite you to follow along on the screen or in your bulletin. On the screen here it says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. You see, Jesus was coming to their house. And so Martha did everything like you and I do, right? When we know a guest is coming, we're shoving all the kids' toys into the closet, right? And then we pull out the Swiffer and we swiff all the dog hair up, and we get the vacuum out and we vacuum the couch, we vacuum the floor, we go to Eldon's, we get a dessert, we take it out of the package, put it on the plate so it looks like we made it. Admit it, you've done that, right? And that's what Martha was done. And that's when she sees Mary. And Mary's just sitting there talking to Jesus, right? Not a care in the world, oblivious. The house could be on fire and she'd have no idea, right? How many of you have a sibling like Mary, right? How many of you are Mary? No, right? But that's when the comparison game begins. Right there. The story goes on. It says, she came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. She's saying to Jesus, won't you give her a kick in the rear here? Well, let's keep going. And that's when Jesus said to her, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And if you're in the room today and you're like Martha, you're going, what? And if you're like Mary, you're going, see? Right? And that's the comparison game, isn't it? The comparison game is on. You see, Martha is busy doing all the things that you and I would do. She's pulling the hot dish out of the oven. She's pulling out the fine china she hasn't used in years. She's doing all the things. And that's when she sees out of the corner of her eye, she sees Mary sitting there with Jesus and the disciples just laughing away. And that's when the comparison game is on. Because all of a sudden for Martha, rather than preparing, she's comparing. Rather than preparing, she's comparing. And there's no win in comparison, right? You see, comparison does a few things to us. Comparison is a trickster and it's a thief. Comparison is a trickster because it fools us into believing that little image, that little picture we have of somebody else's life, that picture that we compare ourselves to. Comparison is a trickster in that it fools us into believing that that's the full story. In about 6 months, all of your mailboxes are going to get flooded with Christmas cards, right? And you're going to get those Christmas pictures in the mail that are so nauseatingly beautiful, it makes you sick, right? What those Christmas card pictures don't tell you is that right before that picture was taken, there was likely a World War III argument that took place to get the whole family there, right? And as soon as that picture was taken, little Johnny likely threw up all over, right? And Dad paid the photographer a little extra to Photoshop in your brother Scott, because he was having none of it, right? You see, comparison is a trickster. It doesn't ever tell the whole story. And comparison is also a thief. And if you've fallen asleep, I want you to wake up because this is important. You see, comparison is a thief. It robs us. Comparison robs us of our ability to see what God sees in you and in me. Whenever we start comparing, we lose our ability to see how unique God has created you. We lose our ability to see how beautiful you are, women. We lose our ability to see what great parents we are, what potential we have in this world. We lose our ability to see what God sees in you and me, because comparison is a thief. Folks, as I wrap this up today, I want you to know that we have a God who is for the unique you that God created. God is for the unique you that God created. Not necessarily that you, that version of you that's always comparing yourself to everybody else. Not necessarily that version of you that's always striving to be like everyone else. That version of you that's been tricked, that's been robbed, and fooled into believing that you're inadequate. You see, God is for you, that unique you that God created you to be. And so tonight, my challenge to you is this. What if you were to let go of that version of you that's always comparing yourself to everyone else? What would that be like, to let go of that version of you that looks to your right and looks to those on your left to determine how you measure up? You see, we have a God who is for you, that unique you that God created. And so I invite you to let go. Let go of that version of you that's always comparing yourself to everyone else, and rest in who God has created you to be. Can I pray for you tonight? Gracious God, we know that every last one of us get caught up in the comparison game. And so we ask that somehow you would help us to let go. Let go of that version of ourselves that spends so much time comparing ourselves to others. that we might see who you see in us. Someone strong, someone beautiful, a great parent, a gifted coworker, whatever it might be. God, help us to see that. God, we pray all this in your name. Amen.
All right, I think this next one's a standing one, so let's get